Hey guys, Greg here. We're going to talk about The Clash again. Saw another documentary on the great punk band The Clash. This is called The Rise and Fall of The Clash from 2012. We saw it on MTV last night. You know, I've been reviewing a lot of documentaries lately, and last night I told my wife, let's watch the one on Tower Records that I've been telling you about, and I reviewed with good reception on the VC. And she said, I taped something on The Clash. Let's watch that instead. So that's cool. But I wanted to get this review out before I forgot all the great information, because some of these reviews are coming 3-4 weeks after I watched the documentary, which is bad. I realize that, but we keep watching them for some reason. I got to spend more time listening to records than watching documentaries. So The Rise and the Fall of The Clash, I would say it's really about the fall of The Clash, not the rise of The Clash. This is about the members of The Clash, the interpersonal relationships and the personalities and the different band members that came and went. This is not really about The Clash as a cultural phenomenon or their impact on punk music or their impact on rock music. And it certainly doesn't spend a lot of time in the rise of The Clash, of how they ascended to this great status. It really talks about how screwed up some of the people in the band were, and how different people maybe made some terrible decisions. And this is sort of along the lines of the MTV Behind the Music. It's like, all these people are screwed up and they screwed up the band. Well, you know, what do you expect from rock and roll? What do you expect when you shove 5 blokes in a van for 5 years? You expect them to come out of that, you know, hugs and kisses? But there's more to it than that. So let me try to get into some of the specifics here. So the person who's mentioned the most in the first 20 minutes of the movie is a guy named Bernard Rhodes. Bernard Rhodes, who was sort of producer, I guess you'd call him, impresario. He was a guy who started in the fashion industry, and I think today he's still in the fashion industry, and you know, makes punky t-shirts, and I think he takes credit for the punk t-shirts with no arms. But he also takes credit for helping sort of put the Sex Pistols together, and you know, discovering John Lydon, Johnny Rotten, and he's a guy who wants to take credit for stuff, and that kind of annoyed people. That's a running theme throughout this movie, is this guy Bernard Rhodes' ego and controllingism, and he basically wanted to create The Clash as a band that he wanted to market. So it was almost a marketing brand from day one. It wasn't as punk rock as we think, if you look at it that way, that this was just the brainchild of some marketing guy who wanted to sell t-shirts. He also acted like he wanted to be in the band. He was like the fifth Beatle, like the George Martin, who's, well, worse than George Martin. He's the 5th Clash band member who wasn't a member and wasn't really a musician. So anyway, he got kicked out early in the career of the band, and that was probably not a bad idea. One of the early scenes is, I don't know if it was Joe Strummer, went over to his house and noticed that Bernard was sitting on a large stack of some kind of a communist magazines, and he's very into communism and Marxism. That's a running theme throughout all of The Clash's material, and he wanted to create a sort of political band. He's like, you know, let's talk about something important, like power to the people, not just love song, and he broke up with a girl. Who cares about that? There's been a million bands who've done that. Let's talk about something a little more important. So that is part of the legacy of The Clash, is they kind of brought that perspective of a bigger issue to their music, rather than what girl and what guy did what together, and you know, all that nonsense. We got enough love songs in the world, guys. I think we have enough already. But so Bernard Rhodes was really kind of in the shadow of Malcolm McLaren. Malcolm McLaren had a lot of success as being kind of a producer and an impresario of bands in England at that time, and it's like Bernard kind of wanted to be the next Malcolm McLaren, and he wanted to inject himself into the records. There's this other weird character. Best name you're going to hear on the VC in a while. Cosmo Vinyl, Cosmo with a K. He's like the press agent slash manager. He makes an appearance a few times, but not really a huge character in the movie anyway. Oh, I forgot to tell you the style of this documentary. So the person who's getting ragged on the most, Bernard Rhodes, is still alive, and he did not appear in the movie. He probably didn't want to, I'm guessing. But many of the former band members cooperated with the filmmakers. Mick Jones, the guitar player, featured throughout the movie. Some of the later guitar players, I'll get into that later. Joe Strummer obviously died, how many years ago? Many years ago. So I'm just going to take you through some of the progression of what happened to the band. Again, it's about the personalities that didn't get along, and who's fighting for control and creative control, and who's getting on whose nerves, and who's using a lot of drugs. I didn't mean to make a nose motion when I said drugs, because I do not snort any drugs. I drink them in a glass with ice, usually. The drummer, Topper, as he was called, was known to use a lot of drugs. I think it was cocaine, just cocaine and alcohol and pot maybe. But they were concerned about his effectiveness as a drummer. He comes off really well in this movie as being just an absolutely outstanding drummer. Huge amount of energy and great timing and rhythm. And this lady in the movie, Pearl Harbor, I think she produced some of the records, and she was Strummer's girlfriend. She says repeatedly, I think it was her, he's the greatest drummer in the world. So, I mean, the Clash, they had energy in the early days. Huge amounts of energy, on-stage presence, charisma. And I think they're one of those bands that you got to see live, because the live experience is 1,000 times better than the record experience. So anyway, the drummer. Eventually, they kicked him out of the band. That's early on in the movie that they kicked Topper Heaton out of the band. And that came back to haunt them because they may have done that too early. They could have just, said, hey, let's chill out, let's go into rehab, let's take some time off, let's get our heads together. But they just kicked him out. It's like, that's kind of a drastic move. But you had people like Bernard Rhodes and other management. They had another management company for a while that were like, hey, this is a business. You get on the road, you do the tour, you bring in the money. And that was one of the ironies of this whole movie, is Bernard Rhodes and started with this whole, hey, I'm socialist, I'm communist, and then they turn around and say, this is a capitalist enterprise, guys. We're raising a lot of money, we're selling a lot of records, we're selling out shows, we're selling a lot of merch. The money's rolling in, and we're running this thing like with military precision. So Topper gets out. I don't remember the name of the guy who came in, the drummer behind him, but he's like, I'm into progressive rock, I'm into Rush, don't tell anybody, because that's not very punk rock. That's one of the nice things about the Clash to begin with, is they had people of all different musical personalities and different musical tastes and backgrounds that came together to create a great band. Let's see, I got a lot of notes here, and of course I can't read my own writing. So Mick Jones is a big part of the Clash's sound, the guitar player and a co-songwriter with Joe Strummer. And some people will say that they probably couldn't write those songs as well without Mick being around. Now, Mick, what are we, 30 years later, 40 years later, being interviewed for this, I'm like, who's that goofy looking British guy with the bad teeth and the bald, and even more bald than me? And he's wearing like this country club suit. It's like, oh, that's Mick Jones. He looks like just a sort of average upper class British barrister or accountant. He looks 0% rock and roll and 0% punk rock. So that becomes a reoccurring theme in the sort of late to middle section of the documentary, is Mick Jones may have had a little ego problem and may have become enamored with the idea of becoming a rock star. He did want to hang out with supermodels and fancy cars and big fancy country estates, and he wanted to be treated like a diva or I want everything first class because of course he doesn't talk like that. He talks like Cockney, lower class. But the band was getting annoyed with his ego and his sort of change in attitude of like, it's all about the money and it's all very commercial, and our band is about rebelling against all that stuff, and now you're becoming what we rebelled against. Yeah, they did kick Mick Jones out of the band, and that was kind of shocking also. And this was at a period of time when Bernard Rhodes had come back to the band and was running the band, like I said, with military precision. The socialist who wanted to help the world supposedly became the Stalinist, and the band members complained that he was exploiting us like slaves. So the guys they brought in to replace Mick Jones, they brought in 2 guitar players, 2 for the price of 1. And then Joe Strummer could take more of a frontman role as a singer, and you got these 2 guys playing guitar. Well, the problem with that is, okay, this is a brand, this is a commercial brand. You're out there to play these songs the way we tell them, the way we tell you. You play the solo that Mick Jones played on the record, so the audience can hear the solo that they want to hear. There's no improvising. You get up and play it exactly the way we tell you to play it. You stand where we tell you to stand, and make sure you wear the suit and the shirt that we tell you to wear. And the 2 other guys, the 2 the 2 guitar players they brought in, Nick Shepard and Vince White. I guess those were the 2 later guitar players they brought in. Those seem like very cool guys, very cool together guys, good musicians. And the Clash really wasn't looking for good musicians. They were looking for punk rock energy. Well, I guess Shepard had some of that punk rock attitude and energy. And Vince White, the interview with him, he's like standing out on the street on the sidewalk, the camera on him, and he goes through this long progression of his history with the band. Not long, but there's a beginning, middle, and end. And sort of during the middle, he's drinking a lot of beer, and he gets like, the beer gets him talking a little more free-flowing, and he really is accusing Bernard Rhodes of being just a complete a-hole. And he said, like, this was a terrible time in my life to be out there touring for, he said, 100 pounds a week, and being treated like a slave, and no creativity, no creative input. Just, you do what I say. This is the brand I've built. I'm in charge. Play the notes you're supposed to play. By the end of it, Vince was breaking down in tears. It was actually pretty sad. So rather than advocate for the workers, Mr. Rhodes is now exploiting the means of production. I think that's pretty ironic. What else can I tell you? So this documentary got mixed reviews. I think it tells a good story, but it tells a small story. It's the story of the personality conflicts. And it is not a feel-good movie at all. It is kind of a depressing movie about how jerky some people can be and how screwed up people can be. My wife actually didn't like it. My wife is the big Clash fan, by the way. I came to the Clash late in life. Late 70s, mid to late 70s. I was living in St. Louis. I was listening to Eric Clapton and Van Halen. And the Clash didn't really make it to St. Louis Midwest, I think. Then when I came out to LA and I finally met my wife in '83, I was going to UCLA, X was big, and I was working at the record store. All this stuff started kind of popping. The Clash, I hear London calling. Oh, I didn't show you the records, guys. Oh, jeez, I knew I'm missing something. I showed you the first record. Oh yeah, I got to show you this record. First record, 1976. The Clash, Give 'Em Enough Rope. Sandinista, again, with the socialist bent, revolutionary bent. This is a good record, 3-record set. A lot of great stuff on here, guys. I'm going to get to the last one. The last and most horrible Clash record of all. This record is really a Bernard Rhodes record, unfortunately. It says here that it's produced by Jose Unidos. Sounds like some sort of Spanish revolutionary or Central American revolutionary. There is nobody named Jose Unidos. That was simply the amalgamation of Bernard Rhodes and Joe Strummer working on the album together without Mick Jones. And they interviewed the guy who did the drum programming on this. Yeah, they brought in electric, those stupid electric synth drums because those were kind of popular in the 80s. But that's not punk rock, guys. And this record is kind of a document of how the Clash had really fallen apart by this time. So there's one song on here that's kind of, worthwhile. This Is England, but drum track, synth drum instead of live drummer. The drummer was not, the live drummer for the Clash was not happy about that. And then Bernard Rhodes, like I said, was a fashion guy. And he changed their look. They look like the Village People or fashion models. They don't look like a punk rock band by the end of this thing. That was his deal. Okay, we'll throw a punk rock guy for nostalgia's sake. We'll throw a mohawk on there. But cut the crap. Well, this is crap. Joe Strummer admitted it. I think he did some kind of apology tour and tried to take out newspaper ads saying, hey, that record's not the Clash, guys. I'm sorry. Anyway, there's more to the story. There's a lot more to every story. This has gone on too long. Thanks for watching. If anybody stuck it out for 17 minutes, I applaud you. I'm going to go listen to a record or watch a documentary. Thanks for watching, guys. Check you later.